Good morning. Welcome to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. I'm Kim McCleary, President and CEO, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you to today's program. To our members and viewers, thank you so much for your ongoing support and viewership. We couldn't do this without your help. For those of you who would like to submit questions, there's a control panel on the right-hand side of the screen where you can type in your questions. Jessica DeGanzik, our Vice President of Events, will be managing your questions during the Q&A portion of today's program, and she'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. I know there will be so many. The question and answer period should start in about 30 minutes. It's now my great pleasure to introduce today's program, a conversation with the Crown Princess of Iran, Yasmine Pahlavi, moderated by Lisa Daftari, an award-winning investigative journalist. Lisa, it's so great to have you back as a moderator.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're looking forward to today's program. So without further ado, let me turn this over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I want to start off by wishing a happy International Women's Day to all the women in the audience, and of course, the men who love and support and encourage them to live, work, accomplish, persist to the best of their potential. It's quite an appropriate day to sit down with you, Yasmine. Welcome to the program. I want to wish you a happy International Women's Day as we honor today the mothers, the daughters, the fighters, the leaders, and more than anything, highlighting the fact that, like most women like yourself, play all those different roles in one and often do so silently. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa and Kim, for the introduction, and thank you to the World Affairs Council for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to having this chat with you, and on this great day, hopefully we'll be able to really dive deeply into some of the difficulties about being a woman and some of the things we should all celebrate about being a woman, and as you said, to celebrate the men who support us.
Absolutely. And Yasmine, being the humble person she is, has asked me to call her Yasmine and not Princess or Your Highness. Or so I thank you for that. And I'm sure this will be a wonderful interview that where we can hear about all the various facets of your life, the ups, the downs, the blessings, and of course, the challenges. I want to start off with a question that's probably on the minds of a lot of people today, even more so perhaps in light of last night's interview between Oprah and the Prince and Princess Meghan. How does one meet and marry a prince?
Okay, first I'd just like to admit that I did not watch the interview.
Neither did I.
On purpose. I didn't want to watch anyone sort of throw anyone under the bus. And I got the impression that maybe that was going to happen. And I have no loyalty to either side, but I just don't think we should all air all that laundry in public. But how does one meet a prince? Well, I met my prince in Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C.
Women, pay attention when you walk through airports.
I'm telling you, travel, airports, you never know, you're gonna meet the love of your life, so be prepared. Don't wear sweats, maybe. No, but in seriousness, I was actually quite young. It was the summer before my senior year in high school, and I was coming to Washington to visit universities, decide whether I wanted to come here for school. And it just so happened, totally by coincidence, that I arrived at the same time that he was arriving from New York. I was arriving from San Francisco, and we were fortunate enough to have some mutual friends at the airport who basically introduced us, and the rest is history. You know, we sort of just got to know each other that way.
Like most Iranians and all immigrants for that reason, for that matter, those who've left Iran always have an interesting story. How old were you when you left Iran? How did you move to the United States? And how has your specific immigrant story shaped your life?
Well, I think I was certainly fortunate enough to never be in the circumstances that a lot of Iranians have been during these years, escaping Iran and having to live in very unfortunate circumstances. My story was more conventional. My parents, we left right before the Shah left. So January 79, we left Iran. I was 9 years old. And actually, I lived with my mom. My dad had left a few weeks before. And we moved directly to San Francisco, to California. So it was definitely a culture shock. I think that's probably my strongest memory, was that I was suddenly exposed to so many different types of people from all walks of life. And, you know, we have such a rather more homogenous society in Iran, at least the one that I'd experienced that thus far.
Why San Francisco?
Good question. I always ask my parents that, like, why San Francisco? Because we had so many more families and friends who moved to France, and I think that would have been probably an easier transition, just to be surrounded by people I knew.
Mm-hmm.
I think my mom maybe had some distant cousin, but it was certainly, it was really not a good. It was very, very hard to adjust because, you know, my parents barely spoke English, and so mm-hmm. I was required to sort of grow up pretty fast, and I became, you know, their eyes and ears, and it was a challenge. And then just being a fifth grader, trying to get accustomed to the public schools in San Francisco, you know, can be pretty rough. And my parents obviously had no idea that, you know, I had to deal with a lot of different things. And being Iranian at the time, not too many people even knew where that was. Mm-hmm. And certainly when the hostages were taken, it was very difficult being a Iranian student in American schools. You know, they considered me an enemy, and
right.
Yeah, it was very challenging.
Yeah, these are, you know, often the obstacles that are not talked about. You know, those Iranians who left before the revolution are considered fortunate. You know, my own family was the same way, and they had their own set of challenges with assimilation. How do you bring up your children to have this dual culture? You know, what do you keep from, you know, our Iranian culture, and what do you adapt from the American culture? You know, how is this poured into your own life as a mother of 3 daughters? I mean, what aspects of your, you know, Iranian American upbringing did you choose to definitely impart on them, and what aspects did you do differently?
Well, I just wanted to say that my parents were not interested in assimilation. they were quite traditional, and they didn't change any of their ways being in America, and they certainly didn't want me to change any of my ways being in America. So there was that, you know, there was a very strict rules in the house, and
so there was no dating before you went to the airport and met your prince.
No dating, no prom, no this, no that. No, and it was just like, my dad was just like, what is that, and why would you need to do that? Like they weren't even trying to sort of understand what's happening. So there was that, and you know, just everything from piercing your ears to wearing nail polish. They just were like more traditional, and also I think like a lot of what drove at least my dad was fear that you know, he's in a culture he doesn't know, fear that something would have happened to me, that, you know, here I am, a young girl, and everything is unfamiliar. And so his reaction to that was to like really be very strict with me, because it really was because he loved me and didn't want me to be, he didn't understand what I was possibly being exposed to. And so that was his reaction. So I don't really have any resentment about that, but I do find it funny that there was really zero assimilation. So
have you done that with your own daughters? No dating, no nail polish?
No, not at all. Because I feel like you know, I think parenting. I became a mother so young that there was very little I knew about how to really be a mom. I didn't have any friends who were moms. I didn't even really have friends at that point that were even married. So I had to really kind of write my own playbook. And I decided the only way I could be is to just, at any given juncture, trust in my gut and do it the way I feel authentically comfortable doing it. So I couldn't follow other people's paths. I couldn't really follow my parents' paths because I was not like them. I was not that person, you know, with that background. So I think that was smart for me because it takes a lot of the pressure off when you when you don't compare yourself to other mothers and other parents and how they're raising their kids. You do the best you can, being authentically yourself. And that way, I think you always have credibility with your kids.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's very sound advice. I want to move to a darker chapter of your life. And that was more recent. In late 2018, you were diagnosed with breast cancer. And that's actually when you first appeared on Instagram, which is a very curious thing for you to appear in the social media realm at such a difficult and vulnerable time. I mean, how did it feel? I mean, why did you want to share your story, first of all, and how did it feel to be so raw at such a difficult time?
It was, I'd been under some, not pressure, but a lot of people had been telling me in the years past that to get into Instagram, that was the new thing to do, and that was the new way to keep in touch with people and sort of have people know what you're doing. And I really resisted that, mainly because, fundamentally, I don't want to be judged. I've been judged so much from a young age that it felt to me like I was why do I want to be on Instagram, on a public forum, only to see if people like me or dislike me or tell me what they think of me, right? So the whole thing, the whole premise was not something that I was attracted to at all. And then when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, it just suddenly occurred to me how little I knew about the disease, despite the fact that in this country, in the United States where I've grown up, there's so many campaigns about breast cancer and about how to prevent it and self-examinations and treatments and everything. I was like, wow, I still am so ignorant. I have no idea. And I certainly never did a breast exam in my life. Like, why didn't I do it? And all those things occurred to me. And then I thought, wow, if I know so little, how must my fellow women and some men who get this disease in Iran, how are they handling these situations where it's culturally or imposed this thing that it's like it's shameful to speak about female problems or female issues. So that's
Right.
when maybe this is a reason to go on this nasty platform called Instagram.
It was incredible. It was like one of your first posts, and you said, I've been diagnosed. I mean, so transparent. And you used the hashtag, which I loved, break the taboo. In Farsi, you wrote break the taboo. Obviously, alluding to the fact that you said, like you said, women are not educating themselves. And, it was a very, very, it's a beautiful moment in your life, in that darkness that you found this way to shine a light.
First of all, I guess I never felt that dark. I was never, I don't know, I didn't get that down on the situation, mainly because I thought it was weird that I got cancer because I thought I was at my healthiest. I felt so good. I was all fit and eating right and doing yoga and meditating. And then someone tells me I have cancer. I'm like, huh, what? So that was more my feeling, was like confusion rather than darkness. But I also realized that, wow, it's not only people in Iran that don't talk about cancer. There are a lot of, I feel like there are a lot of religions that think if you can just bring the name cancer up, that somehow that's bad luck, or that if you let's say a mother who has cancer, breast cancer, then maybe nobody will want to marry her children because they might think that she's passing on some defect. So there's so many things that I was like, wow, like, we just need to talk about this stuff. We have to, as women, we have to talk about our problems because we can learn from like some of the mistakes that I made, even having the best doctors and best treatment. I've learned so much. I've learned from others. It wasn't until I came out and said I had cancer that so many people that I knew came and said, oh yeah, I had cancer. I had breast cancer 2 years ago too. It's like, well, why didn't you say anything? It's very odd that a lot of women feel like they have to deal with this very privately, and I respect that. Those are their choices, but I do think the more we talk, the more we shed light on this disease, it's totally curable. And so we really should talk about it. Nobody should be dying from breast cancer.
No, absolutely. And that's tremendous. I think you've given a lot of people that gift of getting support when they do talk about it. I want to move over to another big part of your life, and that's your dedication to the refugees of Iran. You were so moved by this topic that you decided to go to Greece to pay them a visit. A documentary called The Voiceless Refugees was produced by Iran International, and I highly recommend this to everyone. It's on YouTube. And they basically documented your journey from the initial thoughts of going and making the decision to go visit these refugees to really delving into the very emotional moments that you spent with these refugees. I want to take a look at some of the footage that we have there.
بانو یاسمین تشریف آوردن برای دیدن وضعیت ما توی کمپ موریا. خدمتشون هستیم، میریم توی چادر ما. اینجا زندگی میکنیم، محل زندگی ماست.
شما و شوهر و پسر؟
من و شوهر پسر. اینجا پر از حشرات، پر از موش، در واقع قشنگ موش داشت روی پرده های اینجا راه میرفت. بارون که میگیره، من اونجا تشت گذاشتم، این سوراخ آب چکه میکنه تو زیر آب.
What turned you on to the subject of these refugees, and what ultimately led to this trip coming about?
You know, everything happens sort of in my life. I find it's organic. Like you don't expect that you'll be doing a certain type of thing, and then suddenly you find yourself doing something so wonderful and rewarding. What ended up really happening was that a reporter asked me for an interview, and she wanted to talk about my breast cancer. At this point, I felt like I'd talked enough about the breast cancer, and I thought, who wants to hear me doing that again? And so I looked up some of the work that she had done, and I saw that she'd made some really great, impactful videos of refugees all over the world, and Iranian refugees. I didn't really realize we still had an Iranian refugee problem. So really, that's how I came to become interested, become aware, and it was because of that reporter from Iran International, Taboos, who I ended up, I just basically asked her, I said, listen, instead of just doing a day in my life or whatever she was trying to do, how about we go together and we see what's happening up front, up close, and so that's how it came about.
It's difficult to watch this documentary. I mean, as an Iranian, as a humanitarian, as a human being, it's very difficult to watch some of these scenes. And we just saw a snippet of it, but it's incredible. And maybe you can describe for us more. What did you see there? How would you describe, your own emotional roller coaster during this trip?
Well, first, I have to say that this was the single most rewarding experience of my life. Going there, not knowing what to expect. I really didn't know anything. I had not seen any pictures or videos. I hadn't tried to sort of prepare myself, because I just wanted to see it from my own eyes and make up my own mind about what's happening and what can be done. So I guess if I were to sum it all up, is that despite horrible, terrible conditions, and not only what they had escaped from, their stories of what they had endured in Iran, but then coming to Greece and enduring further humiliations and abuse and trauma. What I took away from it is how much the human spirit. I mean, these people still were so giving, so loving, so kind, so it was so lovely being with them. I got so much energy from them. I almost felt guilty because they were making me feel good or feel better as opposed to the other way around. And these children and their smiles and it was just so strange that you could see, despite all the trauma, that a little bit of joy in those moments, was everything. And the conditions these people were living under, especially when we went to Lesbos, the island of Lesbos, in the camp of Moria. There were some 13,000 refugees were in that clip that you showed in the camp. And then where we went, which was in the clip, was a place called the Jungle, which was outside of the camp. The camp had basically people living mostly in boxes, like metal boxes and tents. And then they'd outgrown that, so now these people were living in these tents. And there's so much, the weather there, the soil doesn't absorb water, so there was so much flooding, children that were being bitten by rats, just lack of basic necessities, hygienic, water, running water, food. It just was really beyond anything one could imagine.
Yes, and you talk about what these children gave you and what these refugees gave you, which is so beautiful, but you're too humble to state this yourself. I will say that in the documentary, it shows how much you gave them, not just in terms of your emotional support, but in providing them with supplies and the internet and printers and books and paper so that they could go online and put their kids in school, so that they can go online and get jobs, really giving them so many resources. And I was able to follow up actually with one of the doctors who's been working very closely with you, who confirmed that over the last year and a half since your trip, a group of about 10 clinicians have actively been serving these Iranian refugees, both in Greece and Turkey, but more so in Greece with the populations that you visited. They're all volunteers. They're doing this on their own time, on FaceTime, through phone calls, trying to prevent incidents of suicide and anxiety, depression and rape, and also helping them with real life skills to deal with the poverty and COVID and homelessness. And of course, this was all done by the Persian American Women's Conference. You and I are both, members of that group and know them very well. And I thank you. It's just tremendous. And I thank all those women and all those volunteers, because not only did you make the trip, and again, I really encourage everyone to see this, because you see so much of I didn't know about these refugees either. And you see so much of what they're going through and how much you've given them, how you've undoubtedly made a tremendous difference in their lives, and you continue to do so. And that's the beautiful part about this entire endeavor. I want to shift a bit over to another aspect of your trip that I found extremely poignant, and that's watching the people and how they interact with you. They've never obviously met you before. You've never served in an official capacity over the people of Iran. But there's a deep historic tie for them, and it's so obvious to see that you remind them of better days, and maybe days that they never even were alive to live through. The statistics, for those who may not know, is that the 83 million people in Iran, about 2/3 of them are under the age of 40, meaning that they never lived during the period of the Shah. They were born after the revolution. And so when you hear the protesters in the streets of Iran calling out for your father-in-law, the Shah, or calling out for your husband to help us, or that, we made a mistake, we saw a lot of that in your trip as well. I want to take a look at a few of these interactions.
داشتم فکر کردم که خیلی خجالت میکشم اگه دیدم به تو باید واقعا عذرخواهی کنم. پدر مادرمون نمیدونستن.
هنوز هم ایران نداشتم.
خیلی تلخه.
نادانی. ما پشت سرمون مرگ دنبالمونه. اینجا هم داریم با مرگ دست و پنجه نرم میکنیم.
خدا گریه نکنین. امشب میخوایم یه ذره با هم دیگه خوش باشیم و جشن بگیریم یه ذره.
خانواده شما زدن.
چقدر خیلی قشنگ،
خانواده شما زدن.
خیلی قشنگ. آخه آخه
What's your reaction?
You know, I just have to say that I was the beneficiary of all the hard work and sacrifice of the Shah Banu and the late king and Reza Shah and everyone who helped build that country and create these souvenirs and memories that have been passed on from generation to generation. I certainly was not deserving of any of those tears and hugs. I took them because, of course, it was just so, they were so lovely. These people, I can't say enough. But yeah, it was very touching. And I was very surprised that they knew so much about me personally. Like I mean, how was I was recognized by sight, and I was very surprised by that. I visited a school without cameras, without people around me, and I entered the school, and there were a few young girls sitting, and suddenly she must have been like 12 or something. She just like got up and ran towards me and gave me this big hug, and I was like, how do you even know who I am? Like, I just walked in here to visit this school. So somehow they're very well informed, maybe because of this Instagram situation. But yeah, I did. I can never forget those people, those faces, and those hugs.
It's tremendous. You and your family represent so much to so many people, and I think I told you this in our initial conversation, that I grew up with this same faux nostalgia for something I never lived through. I was born after the revolution, but I remember, and I was born in the United States, but watching footage of the Shah leaving Iran, I would cry. I would actually cry, and you know, I felt so much, and I'm sure so many people, regardless of their background, can identify with, you know, looking at something of your parents' generation and having a nostalgia for something that wasn't yours but you inherited. And you know, it speaks so much about you and the way that you've lived your life in every chapter. And if there's one pattern that one could pick up on in your life, it's the way that you empower others with everything that you've been given. You've applied this philosophy with your law degree in helping, you know, underprivileged children, and you did this with your fight with cancer in teaching others. You're using your voice to help refugees, to help children, to help the LGBTQ community in Iran who need your help and encouragement. And in using the same philosophy, how would you use, what tools would you give, or how would you empower this and use the same philosophy to advise the freedom-loving people of Iran for their future?
I'm very hesitant to give advice to people whose shoes I'm not walking in. I cannot begin to imagine some of the suffering that our people are enduring, especially our women and children. And so I try not to give advice, and I try not to pretend like I understand. But one thing is for sure is that my way of dealing with problems that are big, when I'm faced with big problems, is I try to tackle one at a time. I try to set very achievable goals. And it was the same for me when when you tackle situations like the refugee problem of Iran, or when you're dealing with the atrocities that women in Iran are enduring, it's easy to get paralyzed and overwhelmed by the problem. And so I think for me in my life, the first thing I always try to do is set achievable goals for myself. What is it that's in my power to change? What is it in my power to affect? And if I do that, I feel like I've contributed something. And often your first step leads to second, third, fourth steps, and you actually end up achieving a lot more than you expected you could. So I just want to say, to just take a minute to acknowledge the fact that there are women right now who are in jail. Some have been sentenced to up to 24 years in prison for not wearing their head covering or headscarves correctly, or some other trumped up charge. And I just want to take a minute just to say their names and to acknowledge their suffering. Saba Daftari, Yasmine Pahlavi, Mojgan Keshavarz, and also to honor the memory of Zahra Ismaili, who was sentenced to death for killing her husband in self-defense, and who actually, from my understanding, had some sort of a cardiac arrest or stroke while being witness to other prisoners being executed. And this heartless regime still, nevertheless, hung her lifeless body as an example to other women who, you know, it's just fear. They want to instill fear in the hearts and minds of the population, and they certainly often achieve that. So I have these people in my heart and my mind. I hope, I don't know what I can do to fundamentally change their circumstance. And when things present themselves that seem like there could be a small change that I could make, I'm certainly always ready to do that.
Yes, and it requires a lot of bravery to do that, the way you just used your platform to raise awareness, the way you've used your platform to give people that, you know, to empower people, to give them the courage, to give them the strength. And that's what's incredible about social media, the way that we're reaching thousands of people right now. You know, there's obviously a lot of love that you've received on social media. You have a tremendous number of followers around the world. But there's also those not so pretty moments. There are the negative comments, the smear campaigns, the cyber hacking, the risk of being just being who you are. Can you tell us about some of these not so pretty moments? Have you ever been fearful to leave your home, to travel? What's it like?
Look, when I married into this family, it was very early on, actually. So we married in 1986. So there's still a huge security risk. Dissidents were still being assassinated in France and Germany. So we did, I entered this life with being very conscious of a lot of these security threats. That being said, even my young self, like I just, you know, again, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't control that kind of stuff. So I really tried to put it out of my head and live my life as normally as possible. And, you know, that's carried through until now. And when it comes to social media and negative comments, look, I mean, there's probably a lot of constructive criticism that people have, and I'm happy to hear it. I always say, if you have a complaint, please also offer a solution at the same time if you have one. You know, it's easy for all of us to sit back and be like, you know, do this, do that, not just towards me, but my husband and a lot of other people in positions of influence. So I appreciate people's opinions when it comes to it being constructive. On the other hand, do I read comments? No. Do I look at what, you know, people post about me? No. I just don't. I don't even watch my own interviews. I can't stand looking myself on anything. So really, I just don't expose myself. I've realized that if you don't expose yourself to negativity, the impact is nearly zero. And so for me, that's the way I handle it. And I hope I wish other people would too, because I think it's really an ugly world out there sometimes on Twitter and Instagram. You know? It
absolutely is. And, you know, especially for you and your family, do you ever have this feeling of, okay, you know, the Pahlavi era, you know, it was wonderful, but it's a closed chapter. I want to focus on my husband and my kids. I want to focus on their futures. I want to have a new chapter away from that negativity. You know, why even deal? Why is there ever a sense of betrayal, you know, by the Iranian people because of what happened? Does that ever serve as a deterrent to get back involved in the story of the Iranian people?
Yes and no. I think some of what you said is true. That I have always, you know, from when I entered this family and saw really firsthand how much trauma was really inflicted on the children of this family, the cousins, on my mother-in-law. Obviously, my father-in-law passing away, I didn't meet him, but I made a decision. I made a very, very clear choice when I had children. I was going to insulate them from all of that. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily would agree with my choice. Maybe a lot of people think of it as some kind of betrayal to Iran and the monarchy and this fight we're all in to bring freedom back to Iran. But really, as a 22-year-old mother, I realized I was not, I did not want my children to be affected the way that I saw the previous generation had been by the events in Iran. And I very, very consciously shielded them from that stuff. I did not really like to discuss politics inside our house. I spent very little time building up this nostalgia in my kids because I did not want them to have any expectation of anything. You know, I wanted my daughters to stand on their own feet. I wanted them to get an education and live in a way that did not rely on their name or their family heritage or what a future Iran may look like. And just like, you know, it's funny, sometimes I hear parents say, oh, I'm going to let my child, I'm not doing religion at home. I'll wait until she's old enough or he's old enough to decide what religion they want to be or if they want to be any religion. That's the way I felt about Iran and the political movement. I said, my kids grow up to a point where they want to participate, then they should. But do I think they owe anything to Iran? Or do I think my husband owes anything to Iran? Or do I think my mother-in-law owes anything to Iran? Absolutely not. They were kicked out. And you know what? I feel for the Iranian people every day because these people are not to be blamed, but I just don't think that I would never want to sacrifice the mental health of my family. And I think that I get criticized for that because maybe other wives, if he had married another type of woman, perhaps there would have been a whole other dynamic in the house. And my only goal was to have a healthy husband, mentally healthy husband. I wanted to give him a peaceful home to come to where he could put everything outside, the stress, the responsibility, the heavy weight that he's carried for these years, and have basically a family life, a real family life. And those were the choices I made. And I respect people who may blame me or, you know, think that was the wrong choice, but I don't have any regrets.
No, spoken like a true Shirzan, as we say in Farsi, or a lioness, a real tiger mom in this case, a wonderful way of protecting those who you love. And unfortunately, my portion of the program has come to an end. We are out of time because I know there are so many questions from the audience that Jessica Duganzik, the Vice President of Events, will take over, and she will do the Q&A portion with you at this time.
Wonderful. I'm so sorry to have to butt in and break up this conversation, but we do have a lot of wonderful questions coming in. The first one, Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, a British Iranian woman who has been detained in Tehran since 2016, has recently had her house arrest orders lifted as her sentence ended on Sunday, but her return to the UK is uncertain as she now faces new charges. What would be your response to rights groups who have accused Iran of normalizing hostage diplomacy with the West? What would need to happen in order for her to be released permanently to her family in the UK?
Honestly, if I knew what we had to do to release these women and these hostages, and also men, I would be speaking out loud and clear. I think the problem is that we're not dealing with a rational foe. This government is not a government that can be relied upon to keep their word. And so any negotiation or any give and take, I think it's really a shot in the dark. They do these things, they keep doing it. The regime has no respect for human rights. And so, as you said, she's been released and now they're probably just gonna come up with some other reason to detain her further. And sadly, I think when we normalize relations with a regime like this, we only help them be stronger, and we only help them oppress their people more.
What are the biggest 2 or 3 misconceptions that Westerners typically have about Iranian society? In what ways have Iranian women living abroad been able to emancipate themselves from their conservative upbringing?
You know, I feel like my mother's generation, there was so much diversity in terms of how women lived their lives. You know, we had female ministers and female lawyers and female any kind of officials, and then we had the very traditional type of stay-at-home moms who really valued their contribution in the household. And so really every kind of outfit was okay as far as I remember, and my parents talk about. And so whether you wish to dress modestly or wish to wear the latest mini skirt styles of the 70s, that was all good to go. And I think as far as I'm concerned, the way I lived my life in exile is, especially in the beginning years, I used to always, when I was asked, because people would kind of be able to tell maybe that I wasn't American, I was always, when I was asked, you know, where are you from? I was always eager to say I'm from Iran, because I wanted to put my face on in their mind as a representative of what an Iranian woman is. And I think that that's probably the best way that Iranian women in exile, or the ones who are born here, you know, we just have to be our best selves and represent the best side of our country, however that may be. That could be, you know, shaving your head, or dressing with a hijab here if you like, or whatever you are, just be the best self you are, so that you give a good impression to people who don't know, who've only seen a certain type of Iranian woman, you know.
Thank you. What was your experience going to a Catholic high school like? I know another Iranian immigrant who also attended Catholic school and was seated at the back of Mass because the nuns didn't want to pressure her into the faith.
Oh, I didn't know you knew that. Yeah, I I did go to a all-girls Catholic school, and it's weird. Like, I hardly know anything about Catholicism. I don't know how I managed that. I just seem to just go through the steps. I think that I got a good education, but as far as any pressure to become, you know, as far as the Catholic nuns and teachers were concerned, there was no pressure whatsoever. And I just looked, and I know this is blasphemous, but I just looked forward to having the crackers. But later I realized the crackers are not, it's not a snack. And so I really was so ignorant as far as, like, I just did not want to engage in any kind of religious education. I had just fled a religious massacre, and I did not want to expose myself to any religion, frankly. This is nothing against the Catholic teachers I had, who were lovely.
It sounds like most Catholics. I don't know it as well as they think. So my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, resulting in a double mastectomy. Afterwards, she started a volunteer group at the hospital called Bosom Buddies to help women going through chemotherapy. Have you thought of helping breast cancer survivors?
Yeah, I actually think that there are so many organizations that are already doing such great work. So I really never considered, you know, starting one of my own. I do participate in different events that they put on, that such organizations put on. But I do think that my main goal was and is to really share, you know, the details of my own treatment process. I mean, I even put on my Instagram pictures of video of the implants that were put in my body as a way to demonstrate the differences between implants and the choices that one could make. So as I've gone through this journey, I realized, even just last month, I realized that I still didn't know what treatments are possible, what things that I should do is better for me. And one of the things I do want to share now is that for those who've had double mastectomies, as this person's wife has, if they have maintained their nipples. I know we're getting a little graphic. I was under the impression that I didn't have anything to worry about anymore, that I was free, I was going to be cancer free in my breast area because I'd had a double mastectomy. But apparently if you have kept your nipples, there is a chance that those cells can come back in that area. And I was 2.5 years into my after my surgery, and I didn't know this, and I realized that I should advocate for myself and ask for an MRI to check that area. And when I asked my doctor, she said, well, that's not the standard of care, but yes, you're right, it could come back there. So, okay, if you want, I will order an MRI. And I was like, well, so all I'm saying is I see my goal more as like spreader of information, and mostly my own personal information. And hopefully someone out there can benefit from it.
Thank you. This questioner says, Happy International Women's Day. Does the Empress have any words for those that are impacted in dealing with mental health issues, especially during times of pandemic? Would love to hear a message of hope, which she always exudes.
Again, I have to just speak from my own experience. I think the way I've maintained my own mental health is I do yoga and meditation, and I spent a lot of time playing games with the kids and taking up things that I'd not done before, like playing basketball or jumping on the trampoline, or whoever has any kind of toy, we've played with it. And so whether you live in a small house or a big house or in a yard or whatever, like we just have, we've taken out the Monopoly games, we've done, so a lot of these things are just, I think it's very unique to each family and the kind of things they enjoy. But one thing is for sure is that if you stop focusing on the negative and just sort of look at what's around you and all the gifts we do have, which hopefully I know a lot of people have lost loved ones, we have too, but really this has been a time where family gives you a lot of support, just being with your family if you can, and that's the way I've maintained my mental health.
Thank you. Iran's Islamist regime persecutes and discriminates against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender citizens. Consequently, gay, lesbian, and bisexual Iranians are forced to hide their sexual orientation and conceal same-sex romantic relationships in order to avoid arrest, imprisonment, flogging, and even execution. What can one woman, even a princess, do about this situation?
I wish there was, I actually don't think one woman from so many thousands of miles away can do much other than to shed light again on these atrocities and to ask those who are in positions of power, who are trying to strike deals with this regime, to understand really fundamentally what is actually going on in Iran. I mean, you mentioned transgender people. It seems that the statistics say that there's some 4,000 surgeries happening every year to transition people from one sex to another, not because this is an openness to being a transgender. It's more because they want to purge Iran of gays and lesbians. So what they're saying is that if you're a man who's gay, it's better that they want to turn you into a woman, whether you want to be a woman or not, and they will allow you to, they force you, basically you have two choices. You can either go to jail, possibly be executed, or you have to have a sex change surgery. And so when you think of things in those terms, and when you think of the numbers, thousands and thousands of young people are undergoing these surgeries. And then what? They have no social network. There's no treatment, mental health treatment or protection. And oftentimes they're then ridiculed and ostracized by society anyway. And so really what I want to shed light on is that Iran does consider homosexuality to be a crime punishable by death. And they're so bold about this outrageous policy that they have, that you have the foreign minister stand up in Germany and basically say that, yeah, well, that's what we do, and be proud of it. And so I think we shouldn't let these people in other civilized countries, people who hold these views. Why is that guy even standing at the podium with a German representative? You know, if there's something that can be done, it's that. Don't let them in your country. Don't allow them to have a platform when they're doing these types of things in Iran to innocent, often young boys and girls. And so, yeah, I wish as a princess I could do something, but all I can do is shed light on the problem.
Do you believe that you will go back to Iran someday soon? And what are you seeing yourself doing there at the time, if your answer is yes?
I try not to think about it in those terms. You know, you never know. You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. I always hope for a return to Iran, as does my husband. I want my children to see the country, and I think of it in those terms. But whether I'm imagining myself in some sort of position of power there, I really don't spend a lot of time thinking in that way.
What is the best way for American non-Muslim men to support their Persian wives, girlfriends, and friends in their life pursuits?
Oh, that's such a cute question. Well, I don't think you can narrow this down to non-Muslim men and Muslim women. I think what all men, many already do this, and the rest should, is to support your wife or your girlfriend or your daughter in whatever way you can to empower them and to make sure that they know that you have their back, but at the same time, they have the capability and the power to achieve all their dreams, and that there is no fundamental inequality. So I really women don't need preferential treatment. We just want equal treatment, and I think that there are so many men out there who are giving their wives and children, daughters and girlfriends that kind of support, and they should be acknowledged, because we can't pit one sex against the other. We're all in this together, and there's something each sex offers to the other, and it's very, very important to not demonize men in general. Sometimes they just don't know any better, and you need to tell them your needs and give them a chance to be there for you. You know, sometimes us women, we keep things in ourselves. We don't talk about our issues, but we really should.
If the USA and Iran engage in the JCPOA, would this signify the beginning of a new future for the Iranian people?
I have no such grand hopes for any deal with anyone. I think the fundamental hope of Iranians is in their own hands, and I don't think deals with foreign nations will either necessarily help or hurt them. I do think, again, like I said before, I think that legitimizing this regime in any way, treating them as real good faith partners in negotiations, is a mistake. And so I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. So I don't know whether, even if you have a piece of paper, whether there's any value to that piece of paper and deal. And you know, the destiny of Iranians is in their own hands. All they ask is for the foreign governments to not make their task harder by legitimizing and supporting this criminal regime that is violating their human rights.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. Lisa, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Thank you so much, Yasmine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and to the members of our audience who sent in very interesting questions. Yasmine, I want to end by just giving you an opportunity to tell us more about your work with the refugees. What do you have planned for the future? How can people get involved? I know you've set up a GoFundMe campaign to allow others to contribute and participate in this wonderful endeavor. So can you please tell us a bit about how people can get involved, where they can find the information, etc.?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to do that. We do have an ongoing GoFundMe because what we've started over there is that we've created this community center this past 14 months. And in that community center, we do have programs for Iranian refugees and other refugees to take language classes for kids to be educated because they're not allowed to go to school oftentimes, for computer and other access, as well as, just basic food and laundry, every type of necessity that could we could provide. We're trying to provide, and we want to continue to be able to do this. So that's why we've got this GoFundMe page, and we're going to, it's on my Instagram, on the bio of my Instagram. So my Instagram is yasmine.pahlavi, and right in the bio, you can click on it, and every dollar counts. I just don't want to see the day where I have to tell them that we can't keep the lights on in that place, and especially during COVID. They've done so much good work. They've fed so many homeless people, leaving little bags outside because of COVID. We couldn't have a lot of the traditional activities that we were having in the community center. And as far as what you said about the mental health aspect and the doctors and the therapists that are helping, I want to thank them. Again, these are all Iranian women, actually. They're reaching back to their homeland, to Iranians who've suffered so much, and they're doing their part. And I can't thank them enough. They've given so much time, and I just hope that anyone who hears this and has the opportunity once COVID is over to go visit, and even if you just have a couple of hours to spend with these people, all they want is someone to hear them. Really, it means so much to them when someone listens to their story. And for them, they've been silenced so long, both inside Iran and now in these horrible conditions in refugee camps.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find those links in Yasmine's social media accounts on Instagram, and I think that Jessica Duganzik will also provide those links in the chat if you want to catch those before you exit the event. And I want to thank everyone who has logged in today to listen to this important conversation. I want to thank the Persian American Women's Conference and their volunteers for, making all of these actual things on the ground happen with real volunteers that give their time and efforts. And to you, Yasmine, for leading the cause and for being the person that you are, to you and your family for bravely coming out and using your platform for good. Obviously, you mean a lot to the Iranian people, and your family has endured a lot. You continue to endure a lot, but we thank you for your courage and for your humility. And we're proud to be Iranian women right alongside you. So happy International Women's Day to you, to everybody who's watching. I wish you all a wonderful day, and we'll hopefully see you at the next event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmine, for this. This was so important, as Lisa said, and so helpful for all of us to have better understanding. We so appreciate your time, and we wish you so well in your great efforts to bring more awareness. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.